Okay, so our topic for the chapter 2 would be about the values and standard behavior. So for this meeting, we hope to learn about values and its kinds, the PNP core values, the standard behavior, the psychology of crime, and the abnormal and normal behavior. So let's first try to understand values. You often hear these values since elementary pa, dun sa ating first subject, your good manners and rights, or right conduct. Undeniably, there is a metaphysical dependence of values in ethics. For values have ethics as one of their indispensable carriers. Ano ba yung mga values na yan? When you say values, these are important. This is something that we value. True enough, ethics and values support each other. Your ethics, this is your ability to distinguish what is right from wrong. And of course, kasama dyan yung ating mga values. And what are the important character that we should have? An ethics without values is hollow and shallow, and therefore weak. Values without ethics are paralytic. Hindi po pwede na may ethics tayo, wala naman tayong values. Needless to say, values are values even if they are not put into practice because primarily, though not absolutely, values are objective. If values are construed this way, it can be inferred that they have nothing to do with ethics. So let's proceed to the next slide. The contention can be justified in view of the fact that not everything which is good is moral or ethical. Lagi ninyong, or kung minsan may naririnig kayo na ano ba yung pinagkaiba ng mabait at saka yung mabuti. Yan. Hindi lahat ng mabait ay mabuti, di ba? And everything which is good may not be or may not be moral or ethical. You have to evaluate. Though nakikita ninyo, something is good, but the question is it moral or is it ethical? In other words, not all values are necessarily moral. The good in a glass of water because it satisfies our thirst does not qualify the water as moral. The good in food because it satisfies our hunger does not make food moral as well. And if you will go back to the psychoanalytical theory of Sigmund Freud, diba we have the id, ego, and super ego. Though, if you satisfy id, it is good. Diba? Si id kasi, it is for our survival. We need to survive. We need to satisfy the id. But, not all satisfaction of id would make you moral. You have to control yourself. That's why we have your ego and your super ego. We need to balance them. So let's talk about values. Ano ba yung values na yan? This is anything that a person considers important in life. Such as, kasama din dyan yung material things, ideas, and experiences. Broad ang ating values. Ano ba yung kinoconsider yung values? Kung ano yung important sa inyo. It could either be a material thing, it could be an idea, or an experience. And let's proceed to the general definition of values. Number 1, values are the object of human desire and striving. They are also the objective or subjective assessment of a particular object insofar as it is good. Number 2, values are our beliefs, those beliefs which we hold to be true. Thus, values inspire us to struggle towards our proximate and ultimate ends. Yan. Values include different things. Yan, hindi lang yung mga ideas. It could also include experiences, your beliefs, no? Anything that you consider important. They can be part of your values. And if you consider something important to you, you will value that. You will appreciate that thing. And it will inspire you to do an action. And it can also define your action. If you value something, of course, you will protect it. You will be inspired from it. You will be motivated from it. Number 3, values refer to things, people, ideas, or goals which are important to life. They enable us to direct, understand, and evaluate our lives. Thus, they refer to our ideals and our principles by which we live. Further, values are those which we like, approve, esteem, enjoy, and prize. Yeah. Simply saying, yung values, no, these are the things that we appreciate, that we protect, and that are important, essential, and necessary for us. Yan ang values that we consider. And so, what do you value in life? O pwede rin yung isama dyan yung mga principles ninyo in life. And it can also affect your decisions in life. Now, let's talk about the kinds of values. So we have biological values, those that are necessary for survival, such as food, shelter, clothing, sex, water, sleep, including physiological needs of man as man. So yung biological needs natin, these are necessary for survival. Ibig sabihin, we need to have these para mag-survive tayo. If you don't have biological values, you will not survive. No? Your body would not survive. Kailangan natin ng food so that we can have energy. And our body needs food. And of course, we need shelter. And the clothing to protect our body. And so those needs are your biological values. Yan yung mga necessary para sa ating survival. Yan. Another kind of values is the psychological values. Those that are necessary for emotional fulfillment of man. Kahit ito na lang ang ating keyword. Yan. The emotional fulfillment. Paano ba napufulfill yung inyong emotions? No? Through relationships, companionship, family, friendships, and love. Yan. So, itong psychological values natin, it satisfies our emotion. Or, it makes us feel good or it makes us feel well because we have someone with us. Yan. And remember, we as humans are social animals. We cannot live without other people. Hindi ka mabubuhay na mag-isa. You cannot live without talking or communicating with others because that is necessary. It can either fulfill your emotions, yan, or your other needs. And that is for your psychological values. Of course, no, kung hindi maganda yung status of your emotion, it would affect everything you do. And for example, you are working, tapos nag-away kayo, for example, or may family problem, diba? It also affects us. And it affects the children and other members of the family. Of course, if you are not emotionally stable, how could you perform your work or how would you be able to handle yourself? It still affects you dahil nga, iniisip mo yan. You are overthinking. No, if you are overthinking, you are not relaxed. Nagkakaroon ka ng anxiety. Nag-worry ka. And it will affect your work. Hindi ka makapag-focus because you are preoccupied. Yan. So, yan ang importance ng ating psychological values. Yan. Next, the intellectual values. We also need this in life. No? Yan, the intellectual fulfillment of man, such as yung achievements, the career, and success. Yan, kaya nga kayo nag-aaral because you want to have a successful life someday. Kaya nga pinili ninyo yung course ninyo dahil ito yung career na gusto ninyo someday. Yan. So, yan yung importance ng intellectual values for us and for those na mga consistent academic achievers. Ayan, sometimes, no, they feel bad when they get bad grades. Ayan, dahil yung goal nila ay makakuha ng magandang grade. Of course, no, that is good. No, there's nothing wrong with that. And without having that drive mo in you, what would you do? Papabayaan mo na lang kasi nga, wala kang motivation. You also need to appreciate your intellectual values because it will help you someday in applying for jobs. Minsan, may mga screening dyan. And, other screening process no includes yung mga general weighted average. For example, in the PNP, yan, sa sobrang dami ng applicants, nagkakaroon ng screening process para mabawasan yan. And for example, ang priority, yung mga may general weighted average na 85 and above. And now, of course, if you fail to have that GWA, you will have a lesser chance in the application. So, it will also help you know, in the future. So, you have to appreciate your intellectual values so that you can have achievements, career, and later on success in life. And so next, let's proceed to your moral values. Of course, no, life will not be complete without moral values. Sabi nga nila, do not just feed yourself, but also feed your soul. And so your moral values, those that are necessary for the spiritual fulfillment of man. You need also to feed your spirit. Okay? And you're too busy with a lot of things, but do not forget your spiritual fulfillment. And there are a lot of ways on how you can fulfill your spirit. It could be through praying, going to church, and helping other people, being good to other people, doing something good. Pagiging mabuti. Helping other people. And that is, or those are the ways on how you can fulfill your spirit. You can pray every night before you sleep. Pray for a good life, or of course you need to thank God. You need to thank the Creator for everything. Kasi nga, hindi ka niya pinabayaan doon sa araw na yan. And, of course, we also need to apologize for all the wrong things that we have done. So, yan yung mga bagay na po pwede natin gawin. When we were, I think, elementary, and we were taught on what should be or what format of prayer can we use. Mga personal prayers ninyo. Po pwedeng ang start ninyo, of course, your you being thankful or grateful to God. Second, being sorry for your sins. Third, for me, ganito yung format na pina-follow ko. But it's up to you actually. Ayan. Yeah. Third, you can ask for guidance from God. That you will be guided in your life. And your family also, pray for your family. And other matters that you want to tell God. You tell Him all your problems. And so there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? Now, let's proceed to the properties of values. So, values number 1 are subjective. And so, when we say values are subjective, we mean that the existence and the validity of values are dependent upon the feelings or attitudes of the subject. Yan. And if we tell that values are objective, it means that the existence and the nature of values are independent of a subject. So, balik muna tayo sa subjective values. Dependent. And it depends on the feelings or attitude of the subject. And how do you feel about these things which are important to you? And how do you act on those things? And if we say that values are objective, we are not talking about or we're not dealing about the feelings or attitudes of the subject. It is independent. The nature of the values is independent. It doesn't depend on the subject. Ibig sabihin, hindi tayo magbabase or we will not base this kung anong nafe-feel ng isang tao about something that is important to him or her. Ayan. And number 3, values are relative. This means that values have intrinsic limitations and imperfections. So, ating values, no, though they are important to us, there are still limitations and imperfections to them. And values are bipolar. This means that values do not exist alone. They always exist with their counter values. Hindi ibig sabihin na bipolar dito. We're talking about the changes in the mood. We're talking about the values that have its or that has no positive or negative aspects. Yung values natin, sometimes they can be positive. And meron din silang counter values. Meron din tayong negative. So, meron silang kabaliktaran. Kung may positive ka dyan, meron din kabaliktaran yung values na yan, na negative. Number 5, values are hierarchical. So, when we say values are hierarchical, we do not classify values, but we rank them. Pagka sinabi mo may hierarchy, there is a ranking. When we rank values, we establish order of importance among them. Yan. So, you have values here, pero ano yung priority mo dyan? What is your priority? For example, your priority is your moral values. And then second is your psychological values. Third is your intellectual values. And lastly, yung biological values. And so how do you rank them? The closest meaning of ranking values is prioritizing values. But we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So he ranked our needs. Kung ano yung dapat daw na i-prioritize natin. And you can actually research for Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you check out there kung ano nga or does it follow na what yung value. Pero yun yung ideal. Yan, yung Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we also have organizational values. So every organization has values that are important to the group. It will help the organization to survive. Organizations develop values much the same as each individual has developed values. And for example, sa school, ano yung values that we have? Fides, Caritas, and Libertas. So we have values no, that we follow. Or for our school, yan yung values na ini-implement natin. Yun yung nakikita ng school na makakatulong with the organization. And iba rin naman yung values na ginagamit ng iba din organizations. And so those are examples of values that we can use in the different or in our organization. Ayan. Next, ano naman yung PNP core values? Since we are on the path of the law enforcement field, we need to know Ano nga ba yung core values ng PNP or ng Philippine National Police? So, number 1 is the love of God or pagiging maka-Diyos. There are also practices yan that shows a love of God sa PNP, yung mga ceremonies. Diyan. Ayan. And number 2, respect for authority. Number 3, selfless love and service to people. Kaya nga meron tayong motto, to serve and protect. And number 4, sanctity of marriage and respect for women. So, a police officer is expected to respect women and, of course, respect the sanctity of his or her marriage with his husband or with his wife or her husband. Number 5, responsible dominion and stewardship over material things. Because there are things, no, yung mga issues, yan, na equipments that were trusted to them. So, it is expected that they would be responsible for this, such as yung mga firearms or mga vehicles that we have. Yan. And number 6, truthfulness. It is expected that every police officer is honest and true to himself or herself. Yan. So, what does the PNP core values state? It states that the police service is a noble profession and demands from its members specialized knowledge and skills and high standards of ethics and morality. High standards of ethics and morality. Pagka sinabi natin na law enforcer yan, no, example yan, or this person should be an exemplary of discipline. A good example of discipline. And in this regard, the PNP members must adhere to and internalize the enduring core values of love of God that we have mentioned earlier. So why is it important in the PNP organization? Because it makes a man more governable and ethical, knowing what is right or wrong. It gives him hope for the future salvation. And in Islam, it is the submission of the will of Allah. As the late President Quezon once said, have faith in the divine providence who guides the destinies of men and nations. So it is important, if a person has love for God or has love of God, he follows the principles which are aligned with the love of God. Because other people, yung mga ibang tao who do not appreciate this, no, they are quite not governable or medyo mahirap, no, silang kausapin or mahirap na paliwanagan because they always seek for explanations and walang katapusang questions. They keep on questioning. They question and question and question and they only believe what they want to believe because they are actually close-minded. But a person who has love of God, no, is presumed to be open-minded. And because he recognizes, no, that we have a creator. In some other cultures or other people, there are some who are atheists or they do not believe in God. But, of course, no, hindi naman natin sila mapipilit if they do not want to. But it is for them, to discover. It is for them to explore. Okay, so next, the respect for authority. So everyone must obey the state authorities because no authority exists without God's permission. And the existing authorities have been put there by God. There are actually some some verses in the Bible regarding your authority. And so whoever opposes the existing authority opposes what God has ordered, and anyone who does so will bring judgment on himself. For rulers are not to be feared by those who do good, but by those who do evil. And there was once a story no, when I was able to talk to uh, the leader of a tribe. Ayan. So, ang sabi niya, uh, there are some kasi na, yun nga, hindi maganda yung image ng police officers, right? For other people. Now, he said, no, na wala namang dapat ikatakot sa police officers. Or, police officers are courageous or matapang daw ang police officers doon sa mga nagbabiolate ng batas. For those who violates the law. Yan. Of course, no, hindi naman daw magagalit yung police officer doon sa mga sumusunod. Doon sa mga rules or doon sa ating batas. Yan. Pero, ang sabi niya, hindi daw natin masisisi yung mga pulis kung magagalit daw sila doon sa taong hindi sumusunod sa batas. Dahil, kasalanan nga naman daw ng taong yan. Yung hindi pagsunod doon sa batas. At, ginagawa lang daw ng pulis yung kanya trabaho. And police officers are given the authority. And we need to respect that. And we have to submit ourselves to the authority. But, of course, authority has its own limitations also. And it should never be abused. Next, let's talk about respect for women and sanctity of marriage. So, if you love someone, you will never do him or her wrong. Love does not consist in gazing at each other, but in looking together in the same direction. Self-control in marriage is imperative, for without it, havoc will ensue. And let's just make this simple. In marriage, both the man and the woman went to the altar and they promised to God that they will love each other. Ibig sabihin, they promised, ano na nga ba yung vows no, ng marriage. Though I'm not yet married, but we have an idea of that. Example, sa parents natin. So, some people, no, until now, with the past years no, of marriage, they are still in love with each other. So, they were able to fulfill their promise. And then, of course, no, it also requires faithfulness. Hindi lang yung loyal or loyalty. No, hindi po pwedeng loyal lang at hindi faithful. That is different. Magkaiba ang loyalty at faithfulness. And in marriage, hindi lang dapat loyal, dapat faithful. So, loyalty is different. No? Loyalty is more on your loyalty to your ally. Medyo mas general si loyalty. Loyalty to the government, loyalty to an organization, yan si loyalty. But faithfulness talks more about, or it is more on the respect for the sanctity of marriage or your faithfulness to a person. That you will not, if you are married, you will not indulge in concubinage or adultery because you are faithful to your husband or to your wife. You can also be faithful to your girlfriend or your boyfriend. Someone who is significant to you. So, yan yung loyalty and yung faithfulness. So, hindi nyo po pwedeng sabihin na loyal naman kayo. Dapat faithful. Hindi sapat na loyal lang, dapat may faithfulness. And of course, no, police officers are expected to respect the women. And vice versa, no, women also must respect men. So, dapat parehas na may mutual or dapat may mutual respect tayo. Now, let's talk about responsible dominion and stewardship over material things. I have told you that ang ating law enforcers, no, they were entrusted with the equipments and the vehicles or other things that are necessary. Now, hindi lang naman yun yung ibig sabihin natin na we need to take care of those things. We also need to regulate our needs to limit the wants. We have needs, we have wants. And we need to be responsible for all the things that we have. And we also need to consider our environment over these things. For example, you are cleaning your vehicle, it is good or it is better that we use something that is eco-friendly. Something that is not toxic to the environment. We also need to consider the environment in taking care of our material things. Because we are only a steward or caretaker for our incoming generations. We need to consider them. Why do we need to take care of our environment? Because we do not own our land forever. It eventually passes on to others to enjoy. And now, kung yung land na yan, it is polluted, paano pa yan mapapakinabangan ng ating susunod na generation? So, all the things that we possess now, may mga, or may impact din yan sa environment. Even the small things, they have an impact, or they have impact to the environment. It could either be bad, and we can minimize those bad effects. So next, lastly, sa ating PNP core values is the truthfulness. It is important, hindi lang dapat law enforcers ang truthful, but also all people should be truthful. Your truthfulness, it is the state of being truthful, wherein a person is sincere, genuine, and honest in agreement. Walang tinatago. Walang bahid na kasinungalingan. And even if you tell the half of the truth, it is not completely true. Or hindi ka pa rin totoo dyan. If half of your statements are lies, and half naman doon ng totoo, still, that statement or those statements are lies. So with the standard rule and conforms to fact or reality, we need to be truthful. And especially when you are called to become a witness in court. Kaya nga meron tayong oath or affirmation. So that you can promise to the court that you will be truthful to the court. And important yung truthfulness, of course, sa ating mga law enforcers because we look at them as men and women of discipline. At nararapat lang na lahat ng sasabihin nila ay katotohanan. Next, let's proceed to standard behavior. Yan. So, what do we mean by behavior? This is any act of person which is observable. This is any observable responses of a person to his environment or a manner of one's conduct. Now, this is how you behave or how you react to your environment. Ayan. Kapag ka dinala ka sa ganitong lugar, how would you react? Pagka pumunta ka ng school, how would you act? Kapag ka nasa bahay ka, how do you behave? Ayan. So, it depends on how you respond to your environment. So, that is your behavior. And those acts are observable. Nakikita yan, napapansin yan ng ibang tao. And kaya nga minsan, yung iba, nakukotion for their actions, for their behavior, because they are inappropriate. So, ang ating behavior, it should be appropriate in our environment. We need to respond appropriately. We need to behave appropriately. And next, let's define human behavior. And so, your human behavior are the acts, attitudes, and performances of flesh and blood individuals. Sino ba yung flesh and blood individuals? Tayo, di ba? As humans. Yan, according to the environment. Yan, animals can also respond to their environment. They can also behave. And so, human behavior specific lang for human. How does a human act? How does a human behave in the or with the environment? Next, let's define psychology. Though you have already heard a lot from psychology. Ito lang, this is a simple definition. Psychology is the science that studies behavior and mental processes. Yan. So, your psychology studies the behavior, the responses of human or even animals to their environment. And how do we process mental? And if the person is a psychologist, there is a common misconception na ang akala nila pagka-psychologist yung isang tao, marunong siyang magbasa ng isip. That is actually wrong. Dahil ang psychology, it studies behavior. It observes, or people who study psychology, they observe how does a person behave in a certain or in a given environment. Yan, kung dadalhin natin siya, for example, doon sa mataong lugar, maingay na lugar, at hindi siya na sanay sa lugar na yan, how would the person behave? Or if we will bring the person to another place, or if we will put the person or let other people socialize with this person, or if we talk to other people, and how would we behave? And would it depend on the person or the environment? Next, let's talk about your personality. Personality is that which distinguishes and characterizes a person. We all have different personality. And personality, may mga disorders din that are associated with personality. Pero yan, sa inyong human behavior na ninyo pag-aaralan or napag-aralan or in your psychology. So you have, or we can have different personality. And it can also change. Pwede ang personality mo pag ikaw ay nasa school, ay tahimik lang. Hindi ka masyadong nakikipag-socialize. Pero pagdating pala sa bahay ninyo, maingay, or you are a very jolly person. You talk often. Iba-iba tayo ng a personality and it can change. So, pwede rin kayong magbago ng personality kung kayo ay nasa ibang lugar. It depends then upon the situation. Ayan. And actually, there is a multiple personalities disorder. Next, let's talk about the two basic factors affecting your behavior. Ayan. So, we have two, actually, you're familiar with this, diba? Si nature and si nurture. Ayan. First, let's talk about your biological factors or the heredity or yung nature natin. So, what are these? Ayan. So, these are explained by heredity, the characteristics of a person acquired from birth, transferred from one generation to another. So, ano daw yung kung pwedeng mag-determine dun sa behavior ng tao or makakapag-explain bakit ganito kaya mag-behave itong tao. Ayan. Yun pala, kung pwedeng namana niya yung kanyang behavior. Merong factor or contribution yung heredity or yung mga genes na namana niya from his or her parents. And it explains that certain emotional aggression, our intelligence, ability, and potentials, and our physical appearance are inherited. So, ito din daw ay maaaring mamana yung emotional aggression, intelligence. Kaya kung minsan, binabanggit ng ibang tao, matalino yung bata dahil matalino din yung kanyang mga magulang. Or yung mga ability ng isang tao. Or physical appearance. Ito pinaka-obvious, yung physical appearance ng isang tao. Yan ay namamana din ng isang tao. Yung kanyang physical na anyo. Yan. And another factor is yung inyong nurture or yung environmental factors. Yan. So, it refers to anything around that person that influences his actions. Some environmental factors are, it could be the family background. So, your nurture or your environment, all the circumstances that surrounds you. Kung pwedeng sa first, yung background ng ating family. Bakit kailangan pag-usapan? Because we live, or it is expected that we are always with our family. We always see what is happening in our family. The family background is a basic consideration because it is in the family whereby an individual first experiences how to relate and interact with each other. So, saan ka nagsisimulang matuto na magsalita, makipag-usap? Ano yung first na word ng isang bata? Saan niya yan natutunan? It will all come from the family. Dito may experience ng bata kung paano siya makikipag-interact sa ibang tao. Kanino ba siya unang makikipag-interact? Sa members ng family. And the family is said to be the cradle of personality development. So remember that. Your family is the cradle of personality development. As a result of either a close or harmonious relationship or a pathogenic family structure. Pagka-pathogenic family structure, meaning there is a problem with the family. It could either be a disturbed family, a broken family, separated or maladjusted relations. So, important, yung family background ng isang tao. And sometimes, dito din na-determine kung bakit naging ganito yung behavior ng isang tao. They were able to track the family background of the person. Bakit kaya itong taong to nalulung sa masamang bisyo? yun pala, yung mga members din ng family nila, ganun din ang ginagawa. Or, kabaliktaran naman. Ayan, naging successful din ang taong ito. Ayan, sa tulong ng kanyang family, who are also successful individuals. So, your family can influence you. Ayan, they can influence you on how you would act or what are the things that you might do in the future or how you will behave. Next, another factor din sa ating environmental factors are the influences of child trauma. Yan. Bakit sa psychology ini-include? Or ito lagi natin na nakikita yan, in psychology. No? They were able to track the traumas, the trauma of this person nung kanyang or during his or her childhood. So, the influences of childhood trauma affects the feeling of security of a child undergoing development processes. Ang pinaka-important phase daw ng ating buhay ay simula nung ating childhood. Yung paglaki ng isang bata. That's why yung pagpapalaki sa isang bata is very important because that will define the person, that will define himself or herself until adulthood. And yung mga yan, po pwede niyang dalhin. Good or bad man, maaari niyang dalhin hanggang sa pagtanda. So the development processes are being blocked sometimes by parental deprivation as a consequence of parents or lack of adequate maturing at home because of parental rejection, overprotection, restrictiveness, over-permissiveness, and faulty discipline. Yan. Kaya kung minsan, ang sinisisi, kung bakit ganun yung nangyari sa bata, ay yung kanyang parents. Yan. Possibly because of parental rejection. Yan. Or mga issues of favoritism. For example, itong si middle child, hindi siya favorite ng parents niya. Yan. Ang favorite ng kanyang mother ay yung kanyang or yung firstborn child, yung panganay. Ang favorite naman ng father ay yung bunso. Yan. Now, this middle child might feel rejection. Kaya kung minsan, sila yung sinasabi na black sheep of the family. And or, yung overprotection, yung mga overprotective parents, yung mga sobrang strict na parents, the restrictiveness, napakaraming bawal. Sobrang higpit na hindi na na-experience ng bata yung other normal things that were experienced by other children. The over-permissiveness, laging pinapaya, sobrang luwag naman. Na hindi na alam ng parent kung saan na nagpunta yung kanyang anak. Dahil konting statement lang or kahit hindi magpaalam, hahayaan din nilang umalis. Or faulty discipline. There was a principle that was passed to me or stated to me. And I will share this with you. No, yung bata daw parang itlog lang. Kapag hinawakan mo ng mahigpit, what will happen? Mababasag yung itlog. It will crash. So, hindi pwede yun. Kapag hawak mo naman yung itlog at masyadong maluwag yung paghawak, pwedeng mahulog at mabasag. So, sira pa rin. So, ang kailangan natin, yung tama lang. Same din with the discipline. No, yung tamang paghawak lang siya. You consider the child as an egg that you hold. Hindi po pwedeng sobrang higpit, hindi rin po pwedeng sobrang luwag. So, next slide na tayo. And so, let's talk about the pathogenic family structure. So, those families associated with high frequency of problems. I have mentioned this to you a while ago. So, first, yung inadequate family. Ano po ba yung inadequate family? They are characterized by the inability to cope with the ordinary problems of family. So, kahit ito na lang, inability to cope with ordinary problems. Sobrang hirap sila na solusyonan yung mga ordinaryong problema lang ng pamilya. It lacks the resources, physical or psychological, for meeting the demands of family satisfaction. Ano ba yung mga kailangan natin? Hindi family. We also have family needs. Of course, kailangan din ng family na mag-survive. Yan. And kailangan din ng family na mag-bond. Yan. Kailangan ng family ng interaction with each other. So, physical or psychological needs no, ng family. Now, kung kulang yan, hindi yan nami-meet ng isang family, no, this family could be an inadequate family. Yan. And we also have the antisocial family. Those that espouse unacceptable values as a result of the influence of parents to their children. Unacceptable values. Silang parent mismo ang nagtuturo ng hindi maganda dun sa kanilang mga anak. They are antisocial family. They influence, or sila mismong parents, sila yung bad influence sa kanilang mga anak. They espouse unacceptable values. Kaya pala ganun yung bata, ganun din pala yung parent. Or ganun din yung tinuro ng kanya parent. And the discordant or disturbed family, characterized by dissatisfaction of one or both parents from the relationship that may express feelings of frustration. And dissatisfaction of one or both parents from the relationship. The parents are not satisfied with their relationship. This is usually due to value differences as common sources of conflict and dissatisfaction. Or, ito yung parents na laging may conflict, laging may away, laging hindi nagkakasundo, laging hindi maganda yung takbo ng kanilang relasyon. Or yung isa, hindi satisfied sa relasyon nila, or both of them are not satisfied with their relationship. Konting kilos lang, laging may away yung parents. Yan. And the disrupted family. So, this is characterized by incompleteness, whether as a result of death, divorce, separation, or some other circumstances. Pagka incomplete na yung family, either one of the parents have died or nag-divorce na sila, though wala pang divorce in our country, they could be annulled or separated from each other. So, yan yung ating disrupted family. Yan. And institutional influences. Part din ng ating environmental factors. So, sino yung ibang tao na po pwedeng mag-influence sa isang bata or sa isang tao? Such as peer groups, yung kanyang mga friends, yung mga kaibigan niya, may influensya sa kanya. It could either be good or bad. And mass media, yung mga nakikita nila sa TV, sa social media, ginagaya nila. Or kung ano yung paniniwala or ano yung mga bagay na nakita nila sa social media nila, agad nilang pinaniniwala. So, yung mass media, malaki yung influence niya, actually, no? Lalo na sa mga bata. Kasi kung ano yung nakikita ng mga bata sa TV, sa cellphones, sa laptops, sa tablets, or iPods, ginagaya nila. Kaya minsan nagtataka yung parents, bakit ganun mag-behave yung kanila mga anak. Dahil yun pala, ginagaya nila yung nakikita nila sa mass media. Or, sa church. No? Church can also influence how would the person or the child act. And of course, sa school. The school also influences you, how you behave. And so all the values that you got from the school are important in developing you as a person. Yan. Yung mga government institutions din natin, they also influence us. And the NGOs or non-government organizations, etc. So lahat ng institutions that we have in our community, no, it influence or these influence the person. And we also have socio-cultural factors that affect your behavior, such as war and violence, group prejudice and discrimination, economic and employment problems, and other social changes. So whatever change no, in the society, for example, doon sa lugar na yan, ay may war and violence, it will affect the person. Or lagi siyang takot dahil yun nga yung nakasanayan niya. Or dahil ganun yung kanilang naging environment. Or nakakaranas ng discrimination yung particular group of people na yun. Yan. Na ang nagbigay yung society din. Okay, so everything that is or everything that is happening in the society that affects an individual is part of your socio-cultural factors. Next, let's talk about nutrition or the quality of food. May kinalaman din daw no, yung nutrition or yung quality of food ng isang tao or that the person intakes. It influences man to commit crime because poverty is one of the many reasons for criminal behavior. So, yung poverty, isa din yan sa reason kung bakit daw nagkakaroon ng criminal behavior yung isang tao. Ayan. Now, kapag ka tinanong mo yung ibang tao, no, ang sasabihin nila, kaya po nag-commit ng crime yan dahil sa kahirapan. And next, let's talk about the psychology of crime or the criminal psychology. If you're still familiar with the formula of criminal behavior, now we have the criminal tendencies, the total situation, and the person's mental and emotional resistance to temptation, or yung R natin. So these factors then can be put into a formula. Yan. Your C, no, which is the crime or criminal behavior. Ito yung mismo Ayan. And the tendency, criminal tendency, plus situation over resistance. So, I hope that you have recalled your formula for criminal behavior. Ayan. T for criminal tendency, ito yung desire or intent to commit the crime. Total situation, ang ibig sabihin natin dyan, yung opportunity niya para i-commit yung crime. Yan. And the resistance to temptation. Kung mas nanaig yung kanyang desire or intent to commit the crime and nagkaroon pa siya ng opportunity over the resistance to temptation, the crime or the criminal act would happen based from our formula. Now, let's talk about the normal and abnormal behaviors. So we have the types of behavior. And we have the normal behavior, followed by your abnormal behavior. So normal behavior is the standard behavior, the socially accepted behavior, because they follow the standard norms of society. Yung normal behavior, ito yung ginagawa ng ordinary tao. That is accepted by the society. Ito yung normal na nangyayari sa society. And ito yung ginagawa ng bawat tao sa society. Now, if the person would violate those norms, no, there would be a reaction. Okay, so let's talk about abnormal behavior. Of course, abnormal behavior, they are different from the normal behavior. Kumbaga, this abnormal behavior, they defy, the social expectations. They are different. They go against, the norms or standard behavior of society. And these are the abnormal behavior. And simple lang naman na ating i-distinguish. No? Your normal behavior, this is what we normally do, and in accordance to our rational thinking or being reasonable in nature, being logical. And we do things in accordance to our rationality. Yan. And the behavior that is acceptable by the society, kung paano ka dapat mag-behave. And if you behave or you misbehave, the society would react to that. Yan. Yung abnormal behavior, they go against these norms, the standards na tinitignan ng society natin, or standards that are set by our society. And normal and abnormal behaviors, they depend relatively on the culture of people. Since a normal behavior to one society may not be accepted or allowed to other societies or individuals. For example, sa atin, normal na mag-accept and be hospitable to our visitors. But in other countries, they don't normally do that. And kung sa atin yung gagawin, we would feel na this is not acceptable for us. So, yung normal and abnormal behaviors natin, it depends. It depends on the culture, the practices that each group of people or community have. Yan. So, what is normal behavior? Understanding criminal behavior includes the idea of knowing who is normal from abnormal one. Of course, if we want to detect if this person has a criminal behavior, dapat alam natin alin yung normal and alin yung abnormal. Na doon pala sa kultura nila, normal lang pala yung ganon. For example, in the Muslim uh, for Muslims, di ba, ang wife ng isang lalaki, hindi lang isa, kung pwedeng dalawa or tatlo. Pero in other societies or in other cultures, sa atin, hindi yan normal. Because they have their own. And we need to determine that. We need to identify that. We need to recognize that. Dapat alam natin alin yung mga normal practices din. And if there are laws that surrounds or laws na may jurisdiction. So, a normal person is characterized by his efficient perception of reality, self-knowledge, ability to exercise voluntary control over his behavior, self-esteem and acceptance, productivity, and his ability to form affectionate relationships with others. So that is what we see as a normal person. Yeah. So we need to distinguish the normal person from an abnormal one. So ano naman yung abnormal? When a person fails to meet criteria that we have mentioned a while ago, then we deem that this person is an abnormal person.